Hey friends, welcome back to the Holistic Health Podcast. We're talking about a really relevant topic today, which is why am I tired all of the time? And I think most of us have felt, at least if you're above your 30s and above,
Yeah.
you've felt that way at some point in time, right? I know I certainly have. And I think I would say it's one of the most common complaints, so to speak, or symptoms that people come to us with, amongst other things. It's usually not the only symptom they're experiencing, but who doesn't want more energy?
I would particularly
Would
like
you
to
like-
sign up for the 2-for-1 package today.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
I think you deserve some. But yeah, and I think for that reason, what I thought we would share a little bit today with everyone and just have a discussion about between ourselves is just what happens when someone comes in and says, look, I'm just really tired and I don't know why I'm tired. I need to explore what the possibilities are. Because as practitioners, we do go through a bit of, or at least I know I do, and I know that you would be the same. We have a bit of a running checklist in our minds of what are the differentials, I guess we would call them in technical terms, which just means what are all the possible avenues that could be leading to this person feeling fatigued? And look, sometimes it's simple, like you're just not sleeping enough. And other times it's more complex than that. And often I would say there's more than one thing driving it. You know, I think it's rare that it's just one thing, or at least by the time someone walks into our virtual clinic, it's usually not just one thing. Otherwise, they'd probably just fix it themselves. So I'd say there's some foundations, isn't there? Like there's some foundational things that we're like, right, it's like when something's broken, actually, you know, you got to make sure that it's actually turned on at the power point, you know.
Yeah, it's IT 101. Is it plugged in?
Do you know once
Is the switch on?
my mum so she's a single mum, and me and my brother aren't particularly handy, so it was basically up to her. She is actually a really handy person. But was this one time I remember when the stove top, I think it was, or the TV, I can't remember, but one of the two wasn't working. And we were trying everything and we called a guy to come out. And of course, this, you know, very like Aussie, like stereotypical Aussie kind of tradie comes out to fix the issue, comes in and he's like, asked us to explain what's going on. We explain, and then I think he was quite good looking as well, which was intimidating already for me as someone who gets very nervous around that. He comes on and he's like, oh, you just got to turn it on here at the PowerPoint. And I melted into my cells. I was so embarrassed, even though it was my mum who called and I was a teenager, so obviously not the one responsible. But anyway, moral of the story, let's make sure the foundations are set.
Yeah, let's go back to basics. And look, as you said, fatigue is always just a symptom of something, and it rarely occurs alone. Sometimes it does, but our job is always to find the underlying cause or causes of something. And as you said, sometimes it is really simple. I might start with this episode is by no means an exhaustive list of the checklists that we run through, but these are probably the most common things that we would think about and probably the most common things that you could go, oh, yeah. And I want to start with actually eating habits because I've had a couple of clients in the last 5 or 6 weeks, guys, tradies, 3 that I can think of who all have been struggling with low energy. And I'm looking at like their output physically and how much they're eating. And I'm like, this is not a mystery.
Yeah.
Like you're not eating enough. Like you're skipping meals, you're having, you know, snacks or like things that are not very sustaining, and the overall volume is low. So I feel like, and that was definitely true for me too. I remember speaking about this a couple of years ago. I was accidentally under eating by about 500 calories a day, and I
just like basically a whole decent sized meal.
Whole meal, yeah. And that was, you know, that was part and parcel because of stress and a diminished appetite. I wasn't going hungry. I wasn't purposely skipping meals. I was eating 3 meals a day, 2, by the way, decent meals, but it wasn't until I started tracking it, I was like, oh, hang on a minute. And then I added some more food in, and what do you know? I started feeling better.
Everyone's so much more pleasant than I originally thought.
Yeah. I'm not as moody as I thought. No, I'm actually not a moody person at all, but definitely energy-wise, I was like, oh. So that was, we're always going to look at, are you eating enough food? Are you eating frequently enough? Are you eating too frequently, which is messing with your blood sugar? Are you getting enough protein, high quality carbs, the right volume, those kinds of things? The second thing, which you have mentioned already, is sleep. Duh. I mean, if you're not getting enough sleep, of course that's going to have an impact. The younger you are, the more you can get away with it. And I think this is why people carry bad habits into their 30s and 40s. I remember in my early 20s, I didn't do drugs, by the way. I just want to say that up front before I say this next statement. But I could dance all night on a Friday night till like 5 a.m., go home, go to bed, sleep for a few hours, get up, go to the beach, go back out Saturday night, probably maybe not out till 5 a.m. that night, but 1, 2 in the morning, and like out Sunday night and then go to work on Monday.
Wow.
And I'm like, wee, I feel great. And so under the influence of youth hormone and growth hormone, like you can just, and good mitochondria, clearly, they haven't copped a hit over time. I was fine. But
what happens now?
What happens now?
Are we seeing you at the clubs at 5 a.m.?
Oh, I wouldn't. It couldn't
you
even
hung
tell
up your
you.
shoes.
I don't even think they're open anymore at that time.
Not
actually.
for you.
Not for me anyway. Not for me. So getting enough sleep, like are you sleeping long enough? What's the quality of your sleep like? Are you getting enough deep sleep, enough REM sleep? Are you getting enough hours before midnight? Is your sleep cycle in alignment with circadian biology or not? One big thing I always look for is obstructive sleep apnea. I find mouth breathing or orofunctional myofascial things are a big contributor to poor sleep. And people often aren't aware that it's waking them up in the night necessarily. They might say I'm a light sleeper or I wake up a lot, I go back to sleep, but I'm never have these long sustained periods. So anyway, for whatever it is, last night for me, it was my parents' cat drooling on me and trying to suffocate me and biting my face. So I did not get enough sleep last night.
Which Amy tried to just tell me was the cat's way of showing affection. So
yes.
I'm going to send help later, don't worry.
I'm a bit scared to go to sleep tonight.
Close your door.
I'm closing my door. He is honestly a little honey pie.
Sounds like it.
But he has a very aggressive form of affection, and it's so funny. He wants his mouth on your mouth, which he's drooling on me, so that's not great. He didn't like my mouth tape either, so he was trying to chew that off. But like I'd turn my head away and he'd put his paw on my face and like turn me back. And So needless to say, tonight he's being locked out of my room. So sleep.
So concerned.
And then the last one I want to mention is stress. It's like stress, even if you're not conscious of it, like is subconsciously really draining. Our brains are always scanning for threat, trying to solve problems, and that's a lot of energy being funneled somewhere other than what you're trying to do in life. Obviously, it influences cortisol, which you're going to talk about in a moment, and when that gets drained, that will absolutely mess up your daytime energy too. But those are some of just the core fundamentals that I feel like if you're listening to this, you might be going, oh, tick.
Or you might be asleep.
Or you could be asleep. You're so tired, you've passed out. You're having a little
nap on the toilet.
Micro sleep now on the toilet. Yeah. So if any of those are ringing true to you, that's absolutely where I would start. But if it's not one of those things, or we've addressed those things, where do we go next?
Well, before we go to where we go next, I think people are going to have a couple of questions about a few things you said. So one
about the cat.
No, I've got so many questions about that, but that's a conversation for outside the studio.
Yes.
I actually think when you said eating frequently enough but not too frequently, I usually say to clients around that every 3 to 5 hour range for most people is pretty appropriate. Is that something you agree with, or do you give a different time range for most people?
Yeah, I think that's a good umbrella recommendation. It really depends. If everything else is robust, 4 to 5 hourly is good. But if there is blood sugar lability, particularly with stress or lack of sleep. There's other reasons why a meal might not sustain you to 4 to 5 hours, in which case it might look more like 3 or 4. What I'm really getting at when I say that is, and I've been through a season of this, people just kind of grazing and picking all day. And every time you eat, your body produces a little bit of cortisol, which then causes sugar dumping. And if you're on this kind of whoop-de-doos, that's what they call it in BMX bike riding, you're kind of like zipping up and down all day, and there's really dysregulates a lot of biological processes, not just the MMC, but which is a gut cleansing process between meals. But it can cause other problems, but in some cases, yes, it's appropriate to eat more frequently.
Yeah. Awesome. And then the other thing I wanted to clarify is maybe just a quick checklist of things that are signs that someone has sleep disordered breathing that they can pick up on just by observing themselves, as opposed to having to go and get a sleep study done, which is important, by the way, if you do feel tired despite adequate rest, or you are ticking any of these boxes we're about to share. But what are some things that you kind of question people on?
So I always in my checklist say, do you snore or do you grind your teeth, or do you wake up with drool on the pillow?
That's yours and not the cat's.
Yeah, that's right. Hard to tell, especially because he chewed my mouth tape off. No. With that, I would say, have you ever been told that you snore? Have you ever been told you sort of wake up gasping? If you're having nightmares, if you're waking up with a dry mouth, bad taste in your mouth, I look at frequent fillings. If you've needed braces, that's another red flag to me that you've got orofacial problems. If you've ever needed teeth out to make room, crowded mouth, underbite, overbite, like it's a tongue position thing. There's a few exercises I take people through as well to determine, their arch and their tongue position and their airway. But ultimately, if you're waking up frequently and you're in a fright as well, even if you're not aware of like choking, that's probably what's happening.
Yeah.
You could, if you don't have a bed partner, you could put your phone on record.
Bed partner. That's so cute.
Lover. Slumber party friend. So if you don't have someone who's like elbowing you in the ribs saying, stop snoring, or you sounded like a freight train last night, you can just record yourself overnight. I know I wear an Oura ring actually, and it has on occasion said, I do think I have very mild sleep apnea. I've been meaning to do a sleep study. Maybe when I do that, we can do an episode on that. But this monitors oxygenation of the blood and has intermittently said potentially breathing problems in the night. There are probably other wearables that could tell you as well, monitoring your blood oxygen. So there's lots of different ways, but the gold standard, of course, is a sleep study. What I find funny about that, though, is the tension that it puts you under in a strange environment means it's not a great baseline. There's one you can order to do at home.
I did mine at home when I did it many years ago.
Yeah.
And I think it's even better now. When I did it back then, there was so many wires and cords and things to set up. I felt like I was Einstein reincarnated trying to put everything
Nikola
together.
Tesla was experimenting.
In the right place. But it does only need to collect a certain number of hours of data to at least give an insight. But I'm sure it's come a long way since then. And I agree personally, I think doing it in an environment that you're used to sleeping in is at least a better gauge, but that all makes sense. And the other thing I was going to add to that list is waking up frequently needing to pee.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, the most obvious red flag. Yes.
And obviously if you're drinking like a litre of water right before bedtime, then sure, that might be your answer. But if you rein that in and then you're still finding that you're waking up and needing to pee, that's another really big red flag for
100%. Most people think they're waking up because their bladder's full, but your bladder's filling up because you're not in a deep sleep and therefore you're not producing enough antidiuretic hormone. And if you're not in a deep sleep for any other obvious reason, it's probably breathing issues.
Yeah, and that kind of smooth muscle contraction that happens when you're mouth breathing and your bladder is a smooth muscle. So definitely a good one to keep an eye out for. So outside of all of those, yes, there are other things that we would look at. And I think for me, some of the top things that I'm checking are, is this person iron deficient, via doing a blood test for iron, making sure that you're doing it in a fasted, rested, hydrated state in the morning. And we've done other episodes on iron if you want to look into how to get it tested properly and ideal ranges, etc. I'd also be looking at, are you deficient in B12? I tend to look at this in a couple of different ways. So I will look at serum B12 and active B12, but because they can be kind of ballpark figures, I would say, and sometimes not super comprehensive, I also look at a fasting homocysteine, which can reflect, yes, B12, but also other B vitamins that feed into that energy pathway. And again, fasted, rested, hydrated sample for that one. And I'm usually looking for that to be sitting somewhere between about kind of 6 and 8 would be pretty indicative that you are B12 adequate. I'd still be looking at the whole picture though. And when you do your iron studies, it's also always important that you're looking at doing a full blood count as well, so we can ensure you've got enough hemoglobin and that your red blood cells have enough oxygen carrying capacity and that's all functioning fine. Because of course, if you're under oxygenated, you're going to feel fatigued too. So that's really important. The other thing that I would say I frequently test in someone who is fatigued is thyroid function, and not just a TSH, which is the message that goes from your brain and tells your thyroid what to do, but actually going that step further and paying for, because it won't be covered by Medicare unless your TSH is out of range, which it's not a guarantee that your TSH would be out of range. You're wanting to pay for a free T4 and a free T3. Whether or not you're in Australia, New Zealand, the US, the UK, you can test it privately. And again, always good to do blood tests, fasted, rested, hydrated in the morning. I wouldn't say that I've got exact specific reference ranges for that, because I do think it's more important to see what the story of those markers are telling. And it is true that some people function perfectly fine at the lower end of the reference range and at the higher end of the reference range. So it's more something that I would probably need to see someone about and like understand more of their context before just saying, oh yes, aim for this marker exactly, and then you're definitely fine or you're definitely not fine. And then I'd also say that I don't always test this, but you can definitely get and we're just talking about simple blood tests here. Of course, there are more complex tests that you can do. You could do a morning cortisol. Now, that is not a reflection of cortisol in its completion, as far as like, you know, looking at the diurnal rhythms of it, or even free cortisol. So it's really a very ballpark big stroke thing. And again, I'm more likely, honestly, to assess whether or not cortisol is a problem based on symptoms and based on history and based on patterns. Sometimes I'll suggest that people do, you know, a kind of a salivary cortisol test at intervals throughout the day. But honestly, my personal experience there in clinic is can usually tell whether it's a problem for someone, and usually it won't change the first steps that you're taking anyway. So I would prefer someone spend their money elsewhere, but that is available and can be handy. So too can assessing something like DHEAS, which is also a loose marker of adrenal capacity to a degree, or even honestly sometimes looking at some of those sex hormones that people are producing and seeing some of the patterns. Not always will it present exactly in that and that's probably a little bit more down a rabbit hole than what I would start with. But those other basics around iron and B12 and homocysteine and thyroid function, they're certainly things you just want to make sure you tick off so that you're not missing something incredibly obvious that could be fixed very easily.
Yes, I do. I'm a big fan of looking at morning cortisol too. And as you just mentioned, the diurnal rhythm, I think this is, as you said, it's not a perfect test, and doing like a 24-hour diurnal rhythm's ideal. But to explain what that means is cortisol should rise in the morning. There should be an elevation of cortisol to A, wake us up and switch off melatonin, and B, to keep us alert for the rest of the day. So if I see people crashing mid-afternoon, sometimes lunchtime, needing a nap or sugar or coffee, I'm like, you're running out of cortisol. It's just not getting you through. And sometimes it can be it's being drained at inappropriate times, or there's inappropriate morning activity to actually bring it up. And that is, definitely a big one that I see. Beyond that, though, I think looking at digestion is a big one. I mean, I really don't think many people can say hand on heart their gut health is fabulous. I would say most people I see have some kind of complaint, whether it's tending to constipation, tending to diarrhea, bloating, certain foods sit heavily, or there's intolerances going there. And the reason that's important is twofold. Number one, you have to be able to break down, digest, metabolize, absorb your food to absorb adequate nutrients, whether that's iron, B12, folate, and all the rest of them for energy production. B vitamins literally help us unlock energy from our food. So there's that. But second of all, when digestion isn't functioning well, you've got the issue where it downregulates phase 2 detox, and therefore you start to get an increased body burden of endogenously manufactured, and so internally manufactured and externally onboarded coffee, alcohol, artificial sweeteners, pollution, stuff like that, that isn't able to be eliminated as well. And so that clearly creates a burden in the body. It's going to trigger inflammation, and inflammation damages mitochondria, and mitochondria are the parts of our cells that make energy. So particularly if it's persistent fatigue that's unresponsive to treatment or regular treatments, it's not anemia or any of those obvious things, that's definitely, we're looking for chronic inflammation. Digestive issues is a big source of it, but so too can be environmental toxins. So non-native EMFs, mycotoxins, stealth infections, things like a root canal, for example, infections, little tiny micro infections like that can have macro effects on the body. So whenever we're seeing that chronic elevated inflammation, usually symptomatically, or if you test the right markers, you can see it on bloods as well. Spoiler alert, I often see perfectly normal CRP in people with extremely high C4A. So it's over 180 different inflammatory markers you can test for. CRP, ESR, great starting place, but just because they look normal doesn't mean you don't have inflammation. And by extension of that, like chronic or recurrent infections will also, like unresolving infections, means the first part of the immune system, the first responders, which is the innate immune system, continues to create extreme amounts of inflammation because the adaptive immune system or the B team that is supposed to roll in and clean things up either don't arrive or aren't able to actually do their programmed duties. So we see this with glandular fever is probably the one I think most people would be most familiar with, Epstein-Barr virus. We see it with Ross River, Parambophorus, like cytomegalovirus. We see it with post-COVID syndrome. I think on a global level brought post-viral fatigue to people's attention. Can happen after the flu as well. You just kind of, in homeopathy, we call it never well since. Ever since this happened, I've never been the same. And we see that a lot with ongoing infection. So we would obviously treat that differently to fatigue that's caused by sleep issues, which would be different again to fatigue caused by nutrient deficiencies. So those are other things that we look at. And then the last thing I'll say is insulin resistance or leptin resistance. So when there are metabolic disorders that affect the way that we access and utilize cellular energy and fuel. So if we see insulin resistance it's going to be more challenging for cells to receive their fuel. And same with leptin resistance, there is a disconnect between the brain and the body as far as how much fuel we have on board. And so the body flips into conservation mode and doesn't allow the body to burn anything other than the bare minimum to keep you alive. And so it's like running on one cylinder, to use a car analogy, where you're just kind of limping along.
I've never understood that analogy because I know nothing about cars, but I do understand enough to know what you mean.
Yeah, if your capacity is this, but you're functioning as if it's this,
Yes.
it's like it's tiny.
Ah, I got it. She did some hand gestures and now I understand.
That's what charades.
Yeah,
She needed the charades.
I'm very much a visual person, so that helps. Thank you. I now understand the cylinder analogy. Yeah, that's so true. And I think pretty much all of those things you can test for. So it's really good to go through that process, and it is a process that we would often go through with clients if we're not resolving the issue by nailing the foundations. I think that the other area that I see a lot of issues with causing fatigue is just people not feeling their feelings, as in the person who is constantly suppressing a lot of emotion, whatever that emotion is, whether it is sadness, anger, frustration, guilt, shame, just any of them. And I think the way that I think of that is you are constantly stuffing things into a cupboard and you're running out of room to put things, you're running out of space to put that in. And if you think about how it feels to shove something in a cupboard, I don't know about you, but I just feel like there's that energy then of overwhelm, of drain, of it's very full without it feeling free to flow. And that's how I think of energy, is that in order for energy or our life force to flow and for us to feel like we can access that, we can't have all of this stuck baggage, stored emotion just sitting there. It will just continue to build up and up and up, and then it will express itself in other ways, whether that's mental, emotional, behavioral, physical symptoms. So I do think that processing your emotions is a really important thing to learn how to do effectively and frequently, not just to do it once a month when you go and book in to see a therapist, but actually, how do I let myself fully feel what's coming up in the moment or as close to the moment as possible, and learn how to let that emotion, which is energy in motion, fully pass through you and go through its loop and out so it's not there. And I also think that something else I see be incredibly draining to people is living a life that feels really inauthentic. And whether that's inauthentic in the way of what you're doing with your time, whether that's inauthentic in the way of how you are expressing yourself or not expressing yourself, whether that's inauthentic in what you are saying and not saying to the people that you love or the people that are in your life. I don't know about you, but it takes a lot of energy to pretend to be something I'm not, or to pretend to be okay when I'm not okay, or to only be a version of myself that makes other people comfortable. And it's not to say that you need to be authentically you 100% in every single situation 100% of the time. But when you look at your life, do you have spaces where you feel you are fully expressed, you feel safe to be yourself, you feel accepted for who you are, and that you're not putting so much energy into performing for whatever the environment, the person it is that you're in. And of course, when we're talking about environment, as far as like living an authentic or aligned life, we might think of, what we're doing for our career or our work. And there's a certain degree of privilege in that choice for some people. And I totally get that for many people listening, you might be in a situation where you just have to do what you've got to do for now for whatever reason. And I don't necessarily think that it's something that is simple to solve, but I think it's worth really considering if there's multiple places in your life or a large chunk of your time is spent in a state that is really not authentic to who you are. It's really worth looking at and considering, how do I get myself out of this situation, even if it takes several steps to get there, because I just don't know how you fully access your absolute potential of your life force when you're living in that kind of state or way.
I think that is such a profound conversation point, and something I think people really, I wish they were more cognizant of. The energy it takes to hold on to things, the energy it takes to pretzel yourself and perform. And as an Enneagram 3, who that was my superpower for a long time until I ran out of fucks to give, is like, I really get that. And I think, as you said, perhaps in many places and spaces, we have to do that to some degree. But having places where you can just put everything down and be fully yourself and be free to say how you feel and what you want is so important. And what I've noticed as a middle-aged gal is, I think that's like why midlife crises happen. And it comes out in different ways. Like, it could be breakdowns. It can be the cliche aging man-child that buys a motorbike. Or referring to anyone in particular. But it's like the amount of energy it takes to hold unprocessed stuff and not allow it to move through you or to be healed. Again, just like me going to the club till 5 a.m. Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. I had the energy back then to do that, but eventually your mitochondria start to slow down and you have to choose more carefully where you spend that energy. And if there's there's been unhealthy coping mechanisms that you've relied on because that's all you had access to at the time for whatever reason, those things are going to start to show themselves. And I really do, just reflecting now on the women, like a lot of the women I see in clinic, like particularly I want to say our generation, but there's a decade between you and me.
It's fine.
So I'll say
I'm wise. I'm wise beyond my years.
You're in my generation, just with
and
maturity.
You're youthful. So maybe just with our powers combined, we're in the same generation. It's fine.
My mitochondria are happy you said that. But just to say, like, adult women in their 30s, definitely their 40s and their 50s. We're running out of energy to give a shit. We're running out of energy to edit ourselves, to make other people feel comfortable. And I'm so here for it. But it is also something that conditioning means we often default back to, and it is very, very draining. So yeah, absolutely, looking at that is a powerful step. And obviously we don't have a supplement for that, but there are other strategies. And I suppose, to wrap up this conversation, ultimately fatigue can be caused by all kinds of things. And as you said at the very beginning, it's usually not just one thing. It's usually just multiple things, multiple layers, and sometimes you've got to start with the foundations and by process of elimination work backwards and then figure out what else might be going underneath the surface. So in this case, of course, if there's obvious things like you're not getting enough sleep and you're not eating enough, start there.
A cat sleeping on your face.
A cat's trying to suffocate
Sort it
you with
out
love
ASAP.
in the night. Probably start there. But if you've ticked off some of those fundamental basics and you're still struggling, this is your sign to reach out and get some professional help and allow someone to actually triage through all of that, work out what's going on and really create a blueprint for you to get your energy back, because you deserve it. We're all designed to have an abundance of energy to get through our day, our daily tasks, pursue our dreams, connect with human beings. And if your world has shrunk because your energy levels have shriveled, please reach out to either Nat or I. We'd love to help you.
Yeah, we would. We love playing naturopathic Cluedo and finding who did it, what they used,
That's the best game.
and how to sort it out. So, yeah, please reach out and we will see you again next week.
See you, friends.